The keynote speaker or the expert of this session is Dr. Ranjana Mittal, Professor and Head of the Department of SPA New Delhi, Department of Architecture. Dr. Ranjana Mittal is a Professor of Architecture at the School of Architecture and Planning, New Delhi, and currently heads the Department of Architecture, where she has been teaching since 1986. Apart from teaching architectural design, history of architecture, and theory of design, she has also coordinated the research programs in the fourth and the final years at the Department of Architecture. She received her PhD from the School of Architecture and Planning, Delhi in 2003. She also received a senior fellowship from the Ministry of Culture at MHRD, Government of India in 2005. She has been on a number of juries and selection panels for academic use as well as professional events, has co-edited the books and written several papers and articles published in the national and international journals. She is known for her dedication and visionary personality. She is a great teacher and influential administrator. Without taking much time, I'll hand over to you, ma'am. Please share your kind words. Yes, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. I want to just say a few words before I start sharing my screen. So, hello everyone. Very, very nice of you, Dr. Santosh Tiwari and Dr. Bipasha Kumar for having invited me. Initially, when Dr. Bipasha asked me to send her a title of my presentation today, I said, okay, I'll tell you. And I really don't know what. I really don't know what my title is, because it is basically something that I have read about, and then I have commented on it from my own experiences. And that's quite a huge chunk of experience. So I'll just start my presentation. The beginning is, I must also ask for your excuses, because I have not had the time to pretty up my presentation. If it were for a student, I would have prettied it up maybe, because I know you all, and I know you how difficult it is for you guys. I'm going to expect that you understand that I did not pretty it up. Yeah.
You're in class?
No. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. Screen is visible.
Okay. So what do you want to do? So that's why my title is what? I don't know what. Okay. So, but for this, but since we have to do it, and I'm glad Vandana Sehgal also mentioned a couple of things that I would mention. I think it's time that we now got together and asked for a particular way of being assessed, because we are architects and different to engineers or even planners. Anyway. So NEP and OBE are the new buzzwords. How does it affect us? Does NEP affect higher education institutes? Does NEP affect professional institutes? Does NEP affect colleges teaching architecture? And then does OBE affect teaching in colleges of architecture? The new education policy, which has taken some time coming, and I'm glad it's come, it is schooling. It's mostly going to affect the schooling. It's not going to affect us too much, because the only place where we will be affected is the fact that the board exams will be low stakes. That is good. Satellite college tests, which means we'll have more people who couldn't make it the first time. Cap on college fee is very, very important, because I find that in the private colleges, the fees are so high that only the rich come, and when the rich come, it's like okay, they're paying, so they pass, and they're it's quite a farce, that those kind of colleges. No rigid separation between science, arts, and commerce may have affected us, but for the fact that our COA has said that we have to have physics, chemistry, and maths, which makes sense. So basically, the new education policy does not affect us too much. It is this kind of stuff that will affect us. All professional education will be an integral part of the education system. Technical education will also be offered within multidisciplinary education. So people, schools like ours, who stand alone, will have to merge with or become multidisciplinary institutions. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because standing by itself, an architecture college or even a planning college is no use, because you have to integrate with the other intellectuals, you have to integrate with the other people in the community. And obviously we'll aim to do a connection, a multidisciplinary institution would be like-minded people, or people who have to be together. Engineers and architects too. Digital infrastructure will be facilitated by the MHRD, and that is important because there is a lot of stuff that we can do now. And suddenly this pandemic has helped, because we suddenly found that we have a lot of information and a lot of ways in which we can facilitate learning. Sorry. Now, India must also take lead in preparing professionals in cutting-edge areas that are fast gaining prominence in important applications to health, environment, and sustainable living. Now, this is what I mean when we say digital infrastructure will be facilitated by the MHRD. Maybe they will, eventually they will. But at the moment, we have already taken a lead in reaching out to our students online. And it will soon be, and this is what we need to do more of. This whole business about teaching them by hand, getting them to sketch in first year and not really letting them use any computers is not a good idea at all, I think. But we do it, and now we won't, because we are now online for the silly little virus that came in. Okay, the ones that will affect us are that we'll have a single regulator for higher education institutions. We'll have multiple entry and exit options in degree courses, low stakes board exam, of course, and common entrance exam for universities. All these make a difference to the people who will come into our class, into our colleges. And if you have a certain kind of a student, you obviously can help him achieve his goals better. A single regulator for higher education institutions. Architects will rely entirely on this Council of Architecture plus somebody else. Now that's fine, but at the moment there are so many little, there you have this one, you have that one, you have the AICT, you have this. Suddenly you do something, oh, it can't be done because of the AICT. You do something else, oh, it can't be done because of the other college regulators. We are lucky in the sense that since we are an institute of national importance, we don't have to worry too much about this anymore. However, you must have a single regulator, and the Council of Architecture must be an important regulator or an important part of the regulatory systems. Multiple entry and exit options we have already given in our school. If the student cannot manage to make it after third year, or he's taken so long in third year that he's not going to be able to complete his course in the stipulated time, he has to leave. All this time people left and had nothing to do. They couldn't take anything else because they'd wasted their 7 years in college, and they had to leave because they did not have they couldn't finish, they wouldn't finish their course in 7 years, and so they had to leave. So 7 years of waste of a very, very difficult time, or very, very crucial time in a child's growing up. Now, when we give them a bachelor's degree, then in third year, if they pass third year, then they get a bachelor's degree and they can do everything that people do with their bachelor's degrees. So that is now, with the new thing, they have many multiple entry. They have an entry they have an exit in the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, and they have this business about collecting this bank for credits, which is very, very good. The idea is not to damn somebody and say, go get out of the college, go away, you can't do anything. And then he's too young or she's too young to be branded a failure at that point. So this business about being able to leave with a certificate saying that, okay, I did not waste that 1 year doing nothing. I was in this college and I've got these credits for it. Yeah. So there are some very, very interesting highlights, interesting points of the NEP 2020, which will help us be better in terms of our talking to our students. Now that NEP is fine, NEP is absolutely fine. But 6 years ago, we signed the Washington Accord, which meant that we have to adopt the OB system. The NAB, or the Accreditation Board in India, has said that if you don't have the OBE, you will not have a accreditation. And for engineers especially, this helps because they can then go out and work wherever there are these OBE education, and they are part of the accord. Outcome-based education is student-centered instruction model that focuses on measuring student performance through outcomes. Outcomes include knowledge, skills, and attitudes. The adoption of OBE is considered to be a great step forward for higher education in India, but the actual success lies in the effective adoption and stringent accreditation process to ensure the quality of education is maintained. Now, that is true for anything. A studio is as good as its student director is, whatever the syllabus, and wherever the college. The studio will be just as good as the studio director is, and of course the assisting team even so. So while it is a good idea to do this thing, have outcome-based education, it will not affect us so much. I'll tell you again why, as it will the other theory subjects and the other, for instance, the humanities may be affected because I don't know how they would do it. We are doing it already. It is a process that involves restructuring of curriculum, assessment, and reporting practices in education to reflect the achievement of high order learning and mastery rather than the accumulation of course credits. Now, what are the objectives of outcome-based education? It's a model of education that rejects the traditional focus on what the school provides to the students. It's not a teacher-centered thing, it's a student-centered thing. And whatever the outcomes are, the student must know that they did it and they are able to do it. OBE emphasize setting clear standards for observable, measurable outcomes. That is also not, I mean, we don't really do it in the OBE fashion, but we have a way of evaluating. I'm talking about architecture colleges that will fit. It's a competition of three types of competence. It's a combination of three types of competence. It's practical, knowing how to do things; fundamental, understanding what you're doing and why; reflect, learning, and adapt through self-reflection. Apply knowledge appropriately and responsibly. Now, isn't this exactly what we do when we are writing out our studio programs? Yeah, we state a goal in terms of, okay, you're going to do a building, or you're going to do a hospital, or you're going to do a hotel, or you're going to do this. These are the things that you have to make sure you can do that happen there. And now let's see how you go about it. So each one is given a little hand holding. They look for their case studies. They understand those who know the particular building type well are better off than the ones who don't know. But there are some who don't know at all and who are able to cope up and do much better. So it's basically a system where you are allowed to learn at your own pace. Yeah. Now again, this is the, we have to do it if we want to. If you want our institutions to be accredited by NBA according to facts of the record, it is compulsory, and then institutions follow the outcome-based education model. This is important for us to be at par with the colleges abroad. This is necessary, but when there are some areas where the in National Education Policy, NEP, has creates a situation where it might not be easy for this thing to happen. Because if you're going to all study and learn in your mother tongue, then you will not be able to go abroad, or you will go abroad and then you won't be as thorough in your learning as you would be if you had known the English language before. And this is something that has to be thought out, because English is now a global language. There's no two ways about it. And you have to be uh, following it, because I mean, you're doing everything else to be part of the global scenario. You have to also have a medium of communication, right? Now, the OBE model measures the progress of the graduate in 3 parameters, which are program educational objectives, program outcomes, and course outcomes. Now, this is for the entire course, I would say, not just for the design studio. These are broad statements, the program educational objective broad statements that describe the career and professional accomplishments that the program is preparing the graduates to achieve, and are measured 4 to 5 years after graduation, which means you'll have to keep in touch with your alumni for 4 to 5 years after graduation and see what they're doing, and if they have really used what you taught them, or what you taught them to learn. Now, program outcomes, of course, is basically what you write before you write the program objectives, and course outcomes is again parameters which evaluate each student performance for each course. Now, writing these out is a little difficult, because writing out a program educational objective is to write out the entire system on the way the student is going to get through his 5 years. And that is not difficult, and it is necessary, because there are some subjects that are just so completely unconcerned with what's happening in the studio and things. You have the kind of faculty that just comes there, puts in whatever it has to and goes off, and there is no connection with the main design studio. Now, those are the courses that need to be looked at very carefully, and those need to be structured under these heads. Now, the method of assessment of the candidates during the program is left to the institution to decide. Now, we do mid-semester, end semester, we must have a mid-semester, we must have an end semester, examinations, tutorials, what have you. But the method of assessment should not be a comparative one, it seems. It has to be a comparative one, because you're going to compare it with your students. One will be compared with the other. If one is much better, why is he the top of the class? Because the others didn't do so well, right? So it will have to be a assessment that is comparative. However, we can bring that down, and we can have a pass, fail, or an A, B, C, a D, right? Instead of going into 75 needing 73, that kind of thing. Yeah. So then the key components of OBE and accreditation. Now you have to write a vision, or mission, program education objectives, graduate attributes, and program outcomes. There is this. I just noticed that there was some engineer who's written out these. Gives us a quick PowerPoint presentation to show us how we are supposed to write all these things up. But I have a feeling that we would, as architecture colleges, we would do a better job than any other school. Now, in all this, the teachers become the most crucial person in the implementation of a curriculum. Now, who are the teachers then? The teachers are those who have to work with the students. Now, in a design studio, it's very, very simple. There's very little difference, except the fact that you might have to write a more elaborate course structure, a more elaborate program for the studio, which most people do. Some people don't, but I think most people do, because you have to call a jury and you have to give the brief to the jury. So there is a fairly detailed statement that is made right in the beginning of the studio, given to the students. The students are told how they are to go about it, and at the end of it, we have some solutions. Some are better, some are not. But each student has done the best he could or best she could in the circumstances. Some of them may have been ill, some of them may have had illness at home. So under the circumstances, the students would have done the best they could. And they would have learned, because it was a problem-solving exercise, which is what your outcome thing is also. Yeah, teaching architecture. Sure. Where am I? Now, the traditional way of curriculum design defines content to be taught, describes the way in which the content should be delivered, and the methods of assessing the content. It is something like you come there, you come for history, you explain, you tell them what you have to, and you get off. You may not have seen the places, you may not have read about the places, you're told to do history, you open your Balance of Fletcher or any other, depending on how old you are, you open whichever book there is, say it out and throw it out to the students. The students accept it as another course and go off after that. Now, even history can be more interesting if it is problem oriented or what's it called? Outcome oriented. Sorry. So when the approach is teacher oriented and focus on the teacher's input and lays an emphasis on content and coverage. However, in recent years, there has been a paradigm shift. Well, we always did it like that. We always had a student-centered approach, at least in the design studio, because you were doing something, your teachers came and talked to you about what you were doing, you discussed it, and you improved it or didn't. So again, I'm saying that this way of designing, this way of teaching will not be difficult for architecture colleges. Now, because of the limitations in traditional assessment, teachers have begun to use other types of assessment. Now, again, this is a problem because diversity in higher education increases as students migrate from all over the world, and as more students from different social and economic backgrounds assess education, you have to have a bottom line where everybody unlearns what they have learned and starts learning all over again. So the teacher has to be more than ever involved in his students and be able to write that thing out even better, because what he writes out will then be interpreted by the students under his guidance, of course, but be interpreted by the students and carry on. Yeah, sorry, I'm very sorry about this. Yeah. So teaching architecture, problem solving, outcome based, competence based. Design studios, building construction, visual arts lend themselves superbly to this method. And we've been doing it all the time. I don't think when we started, yes, it was the Bauhaus system, but it has changed so much since. But every time, whenever we worked, when we were taught, it was the idea of a problem that was given. And if you solved it well, if your outcome was good, you were good. If it wasn't so good, you were not so good. And our teachers did well when they created that program for the student, for the studio, they knew exactly what they wanted and why they wanted it and what we were to learn from it. In fact, I remember our teachers telling us, okay, now this is your third submission. We are expecting this. We're expecting you to have figured out your circulation. If your circulation is figured, you'll get your good marks. If your circulation is not figured, whatever your design be, you won't get your marks. So that kind of thing we used to do, we had, and our teachers also did it unknowingly in this fashion. I mean, all these theories and all that have just come up, but it was being done for a long time, and it wasn't called problem solving or outcome based or competence based or anything like that. It was just teaching studio. It was just a studio. Now, major challenges facing architectural education in India by Dr. J.K. Gupta. He says that language, faculty shortage, low exposure to ground reality, poor academic industry interaction, employability numbers, and engineering dominance, course duration, regulatory authorities, and teaching methodologies. Now, language in the sense, now if we are going to have that regional language, which you have to have in the junior classes. There will have to be another language being taught. It'll have to be English, so that if they want to, if they are going to be coming out from their hometowns, from their home states into other places for better professional education, they're going to need a language that they can communicate with others. And when after their basic undergrad education, when they will go for graduate education, they will need it all the more. Faculty shortage is terrible, I know, but now we are also insisting on a whole lot of things. This is, as I've always said, architects are supposed to be building buildings. Architects are supposed to be designing buildings, not writing essays and papers. But that's not understood, and that's not even looked at. However, what I suggest is that we have a faculty, a core faculty, just a core faculty. And then we have as many visiting professors or visiting faculty as we can, because when they come from the profession, they tell you what you have to know. For instance, building construction, how can a person who's done his master's in architecture design, for instance, teach? He's got his PhD, he's got his job as the professor or an assistant professor or an associate professor, and now he has to teach building construction, but he's never done a construction in his life. So how does he teach then? So then that very important subject goes to waste. And then again the students are like, oh, let's finish it, let's finish it. Even the teachers are doing that, let's finish it so quickly, just as qualified subject will be done, right? Whereas if you call even one person who is working on the field and ask them to explain to them what is done, it is a far more exciting and interesting lesson. So you need your doctors and you need your PhDs and you need your research associates and all that. So you do that, but you keep your faculty core small and allow visiting faculty to come in. This can happen, of course, only in big cities. But now, with the online teaching that we've done, we can talk to people outside our cities and have them come in online. Okay, this is the one big advantage we've gained out of this lockdown. We can reach out anywhere. That person is also happy to give you 2 hours a week from his home, no problems at all. And you are able to then, and then the drawing and all that is working out. You've got that Jamboard and you've got writing over and this and that, and everybody will learn to work it out. Low exposure to ground reality. With the mix of students that we have, I don't think there's such a low exposure to ground reality, even in our big cities, because it's in their schools where they are very sheltered from everything else and where they are rather elitist in their own way, unless you're going to a government school. But when they come to college and when they have to go out and do their surveys, and when they have to use the public transport, they are exposed to a ground reality, which is important, and that is what makes them. The school was just a very sheltered place where they had to do well, where they had to become prefects and HOD, and leaders of the student council and stuff, head of student council and stuff. They did all that, but it was all in a cocoon. So when they come out into college, any college, they use public transport and they go out into the city, as they never did when they were in school. There is a fair amount of exposure because of the mix of the students now. Poor academic industry interaction is not true if you have enough visiting faculty coming in, and if you have your juniors and all that coming in from practice into the college just for a little while to look at what we are doing. However, I do believe that the school or any learning institution is an ideal place. So we don't talk about how things are not working out abroad, outside the school. It is a idealistic situation. It has to be. Where else will they create their sense of how do I say, sense of what is right and what is wrong? I mean, if you're going to have what do you mean by academic and industry interaction? It means that you need to know what is happening outside so that you are capable of facing the real world when you get out, right? But you get out and then you are a trainee, so you're learning in the training period how to face the world. What else is there? I mean, and I've had people come in and say, "Oh, ma'am, you're saying this over here. That fellow, he said there that we should do it by design competitions, and then he goes and does something else only in his office. So he's saying something else here and he's doing something else in his office." That has happened once, and I was very embarrassed about it. But then it does happen. So employability also, I mean, it's time that some offices give back, and so you have to train the student. You have to take him in as a trainee. You must take him. If you can afford trainees, please take them in, because they have to learn that part in your office or in some other office. But they have to learn the industry connection outside of school, not inside school. Hmm? Numbers, too many students. Now, some years ago, I took my children to for all their various tests and all that. And I saw each and every student there was just like my kid, earnest, wanting it. And I realized out of so many, only 30 would come in. That's how we failed these people. They need place to learn. So you have to have, and we have these architects saying, "Oh, there are too many architects coming out, too many architects coming out." Oh, now, hang on. May not all do architecture. They may do other things, but you have to give them place to study. You see, so there are too many students, but we have many colleges, but the colleges don't have enough faculty. Again, because in one place when I had gone for inspection, I asked this guy. I said, "But he came straight out of college into teaching. I said, but what have you learned? What have you done?" He said, "No, I came here because the salary here is more than salary in an office." And that was it. So what would he teach then? He may teach something. He'll have something to teach, but who is going to tell them about the BC, the latest detail that will allow you to be able to build in a faster fashion? Huh? All that will come only when he goes out, when he's a trainee, or when people from the industry come and talk to him. Hmm? Okay. Now, for architecture, engineering is dominating a hell of a lot, and I noticed now that planning does also. Okay, you look at the employment exchange and all, and they'll have planners or architects. Planners or architects. Nobody seems to want an architect at all, simply because we have not understood that design is important. Design of a building is important. When I was doing my thesis, I went down to the housing department and I asked this guy, I said, "What kind of housing do you do? Are you talking about streets, and are you talking about housing?" He said, "No, we don't do that. We are only doing numbers and all." So they're number crunching all the time for housing. So who's going to do that little thing that requires that to be done, so that the space in front of your house is yours and the public's? You see? So anyway, course duration. According to Mr. Gupta, it's because the course duration is 5 years and the engineers are 4 years. All the leftovers from engineers come to in architecture. No, in any case they come because they have all gone to these, what do you call them? The coaching centers, and they're all coached for engineering. And so since they have to take that exam, they take that and they take the other one also. And then those who don't get into engineering but who are good enough and who elbow out the ones who don't know engineering but who are better, who make better architects, they elbow those out and they come here. And first is you have a whole lot of disgruntled figures. Did you want to come here? No, I did not want to come here. I did not want to come here. I wanted to do engineering. So I just got this, and everybody says, "Oh, it's a good place and it's a good degree and all that. You must keep it." So now these guys then push out the ones who would actually have made it. And when we were in school, we had a very hands-on test, entrance test. There were 700 to 800 people came. Now there are thousands of people coming. And then we realized then that the ones who topped the entrance exam then kept their position right till the end. right till the end, they were the better ones. Now, the ones who come in and the first lot are the ones who just not made it to the art, to the engineering. So they have been able to come here on a high number ranking, but the ones who have come in towards the end, the ones who come in on the waiting list and all that, they make better students of architecture and they make probably better architects also. So it's there's something wrong with our education, our entrance exam systems. I'm talking about the AICT ones, no, the CBSE ones. They are really, really so bad. And there's something has to be done about it. Even NATA seems has its own problems. But whatever, our AICT thing gives us a whole lot of students who did not want to come here. So we really have to be working at unlearning their attitude and getting them to like what they're doing. Some of them do, some of them just give up, which is fine. Now, if we can if we can control our intake by producing more such colleges, and this is like what the architecture the syllabus and the course is more like a liberal arts course. You can do anything you want. You're taught a couple of things which come in handy later on, and if you get your BA degree or BBSc we call it, you can do a lot after that. Okay. Yeah, regulatory authorities we talked about, and teaching methodologies. Teaching methodologies, of course, have to be looked at very, very carefully. Not because we have to get that NAC sanction or accreditation, but because we are being very, very lazy about not understanding what is to be done. For instance, first year must draw by hand. So they're drawing large T squares and this, that, and they're going on drawing. They are not told anything about computers. In second year, they have to suddenly know about computers. In third year, they have to know a lot about computers. In fourth year, they're going to be doing only computers. So they learn from each other and they learn and they copy and they paste and they do all kinds of things and they mess up their work. It is imperative now to see the computer as a it's imperative to see the computer and related software as design tools and not just drafting tools. Parametrics, for instance, AI. You're talking about smart cities, and then you have this dissertation saying that smart cities are not smart. You have to be smarter. We had a seminar where we talked about this whole thing about smarter cities, meaning that they didn't just take the internet and lay it all over the place and give everybody a connection to the internet and do their banking and everything online, but they also picked up the traditional issues and were able to include them in their design, traditional parts, traditional details, traditional planning systems, traditional architecture systems, which are relevant today, okay, and were able to convert those into better housing or better spaces for living. So we have to be, whatever you make, whatever kind of building you make, it has to be dependent on natural light, ventilation, and views and all that, of course, right? So when you want to do natural light and ventilation, when you maximize the possibilities of natural light and ventilation, so to bring your costs of energy down, then you have to think about orientation. And orientation is what we do very well in our traditional things. We have a courtyard, finished. Everything takes place in the courtyard. The ventilation happens, and everybody's fine. But those rooms were only meant for storing things, okay, and in times of bad weather. Otherwise, you were out most of the time. Today, you're not. Today, you can't have a courtyard house because it just won't work. You want to cool one room, and then as soon as you open the door, there's a courtyard. You can't have that. So while that courtyard system is very good for ventilation, it's not good for the way it was used. It cannot be the family space anymore. It's the living room with the TV, that's the family space. So we have to be looking at all these things. And as we said before, the teacher has a lot of responsibility in making sure that they understand that computers are not bad. You don't just throw out things. You keep them, you master them and use them to your own advantage. Okay, this is something that I just brought it up because I just brought the first slide up. This Ranganath is again College of Engineering. He's an engineer and he's writing it all for the engineering fellows. But you might have a look at it because it makes sense to see what they are doing also. Yeah, this is part of that only. OB, outcome-based education, outcome-based curriculum, outcome-based learning and teaching, outcome-based assessment. Now, how you do all this is what he's talking about, what the student should be able to do, how to make the student achieve the outcome, how to measure what the student has achieved. All these things we'll have to discuss amongst ourselves. And I'm sure that they allow a lot of autonomy for the various teachers. So while you have an outcome-based education, you have to get your accreditation, and you're going to be doing NEP 2020, you still have a very, very large area of independence. That is, you can work out your own systems, you can work out your own programs, you can work out and learn how to do this best. Yeah. So the HOD and the various student directors can get a fair amount of autonomy. Now, this is something that I had just brought up because I wanted to show you. This was the brief for the jury, and this is what we did in the third year studio. The syllabus required the student to be exposed to active solar energy systems as well as explore the challenges of building a multi-storied. Why a multi-storied? Because they had to learn the vertical circulation as they had done the earlier one. They had done a little school or something like that, and they had learned to how to figure out this circulation horizontally, how you went to each class and how the students went and this, that, and the other. But now you have to do it vertically also. So we did this vertical servicing, so they had to do the lift and the service core, and because they had to do a lift and service cores, they had to think about maintenance, they had to think about orientation, they had to think about view, they had to think about where to fit the lift, and also they had to think about structures. So we decided to do it in Delhi because they were having a location in Delhi, which is a familiar climate zone for us. But more than 75% of our students come from other places. So now, so what we did this time in fourth year was we allowed the students to choose their own sites because the site wasn't important as understanding the context for whatever it was and building on it. Now, for this third year project, which was the multi-storied, we told them very clearly that good design happens only through a meaningful interaction of all the factors that affect the design of a building. That is the services, structure, the MEPs, everything. Okay. The student therefore was informed of the work in the theory of structures, building construction, building science, and services classes. So we had all these people talk about what we wanted them to do. It is the same thing. They were doing what we asked them to do, but in all that was learned the previous semester, especially with respect to energy efficiency. Now, many case studies involving actual visits through published sources were expected. They had to become as familiar as possible with basic design strategies that is essential for energy efficient or net zero buildings. Now, the user, we decided we'll do the millennials as the majority user. These guys, when they would go up and grow out and go to offices, what would they like? So we had young alumni coming in and talking to us about how they like their offices. And they all said, okay, their office is their computer and their phone. And they can sit anywhere and do whatever they want to. So all that. Yeah. They also studied some multi-story for their floor plate and emphasis on layouts and location and design, of course. They had to understand that also. So what we did was we identified some multi-story and they had to give a crit on the floor of it, on the service core and all that of each building. And then we had people coming in for services, strategies for energy efficiency, etc. were organized. This ensured comprehending the design of the form and spaces, particularly in the multi-story. The successful integration of architecture, structure, building material, building services, and construction systems. All this came together, and we had an extremely knowledge-centered, a knowledge-centric studio. And of course, There was always the emphasis to learn to draw and present convincingly through appropriate graphics. Now, all this is what we wrote out right in the beginning. The students knew that they were going to do all this and why they had to do a net zero building. Yeah. So, in keeping with the major thrust, and the studio formal expressions that obeyed the unwritten rules of design but were a result of all studies and input provided were seen as successful solutions. Obeyed the unwritten rules of design, meaning we are not a school that follows a certain design style. As I said, each studio is the product of a studio director, and we did not want to make a situation where we'd have to tell them what to do to make their building nice. They chose what they did and how they did the building. We were only discussing the quantitative aspects of it. The qualitative aspect of it was left, and finally, when you're building a multi-story, it has to look good. And all of us know, most of us agree with what is good and what is bad. And that's how we shared each other's designs, and we learned to talk about each other's designs. And we had many sessions of each one marking another one, or each one marking everyone, we had that too. Yeah. Okay. So basically, I would like to say that we need to change our way of teaching the subsidiary subjects. And in fact, we're going to be having a webinar on next week to discuss the content of the syllabus and the pedagogy of teaching structures to students. I'm afraid when we started this thing, the students had absolutely no idea of structure of a multi-story. Oh, they said 5 by 8 laga do. Why 5 by 8 ka grid kyun lagaye? Because somebody told them that it's very good for the parking. The parking is underground, and parking is like the last thing you want to let your building be governed by, right? So I banned that grid. I said, to hell with the parking. You will now work on your building form as it will be, so that it is relevant to its site and its orientation. And so we had that. Now, I had somebody come in and talk to them about various ways of how multi-stories are built. And it was such an exciting, interesting conversation with that engineer who had been building, I don't know how many multi-story, but he seemed to know every multi-story in and around India. But he was so much fun. Even the students enjoyed the fact that, oh, they could do this, they could do that. It didn't have to be a trabeated kind of post-lintel kind of structure. So they had some very interesting things happening over there. And so I say that all these subsidiaries, all these supporting subjects must be taught in a better fashion. It is not enough to just go and give them a sum or give them something and say, okay, now this is what you're supposed to do, finish it and give it back. That's not how it's done. And for that, a teacher has to work very, very hard. It's easier to just say something, tell them to take down notes, give them an assignment, they'll do it and they come back and they're fine. And you'll notice that even the ones that are going by this, I could call it a competence-based education, or I could call it a problem-based education, or I could even call it a what is it called? Outcome-based education. Wherever they have these things, where in BC, in history, in structures, in design, of course, wherever you have this business about, you tell the students that, okay, this is what we're doing, and now you find a little more about it. It is much, much better. They are far more excited in finding out more for themselves, what they want. But it doesn't mean that the teacher doesn't have to pay attention. Now, if this student decides that he wants to do something in Barbados, now you have to know what Barbados is all about. Okay, somebody wants to do something in Japan. Like this time we had a large span structure in fourth year. We decided to give them options because we wanted different climate zones. And so doing it all in India, we said you go abroad, do it anywhere, put a multi-storied in a city anywhere in the world where you will be able to find it, justify it. And so they went up. They went to Cairo, they went to Tokyo, they went to Abu Dhabi, they went to England, they didn't go to England, nobody went to England. And they went to South Africa. And so we had to also learn up all those things and we had to be able to test them. And then they found out their program. So they also knew how to do their program. And this was in groups, by the way. This was in groups of 2s and 1 or 3. And group work again is very important because then you're learning together. Peer learning is as important as a teacher-student learning system. So anyway, that was it. And yeah, so I do believe that the NEP will affect us well. Wherever it affects us, it's an advantage. And the outcome-based education is what we are doing. We just need to tidy it up further. However, when you look at the forms, the questionnaires, as it is very, very engineering oriented. So we need to change that a bit. And if we are going to change that, that is what I think you should be looking at also, because teaching is happening very much the way they want it to happen. However, we have to be evaluated in a way that we can be seen as doing well and not be penalized for not having 3 papers a year or something like that, especially the visiting professors. Okay, yeah, that's about it. Any questions?
Yes, ma'am. One of the participant from named Kunjan Tyagi is asking, to what extent one can achieve effective learning within the framework of architecture curriculum? Can you please elaborate with one of your exercise?
No, I didn't get that. What did you say? Just repeat that.
Yeah. To what extent one can achieve effective learning within the framework of architecture curriculum? Can you please elaborate with any one of your exercise? It is already written in Q&A also, if you can refer.
Where is it? It's a Q&A. Let me see. What are the parameters and outcomes attributes to enhance design creativity?
No, that's the second question. The second
one. To what extent can one achieve effective learning within the framework of? Can you please? Well, I just showed you a project, no? That the multi-storied in 3rd year. We also did at one time. We did housing in 3rd year or 4th year. We did housing in one of the newer areas, further away from Delhi, where it was going to be connected by the metro. The what is that called? What is it called when you're working with the metro and all that? What's the system called? I'm forgetting. Anyway,
Mass transit?
So with that, sorry?
Mass transit system? Mass transit system?
No, mass transit nahi, or kuch transit oriented development.
Transit oriented.
TOD, okay. So because
Right.
TOD, then we had that line, that road going through the thing. We had the metro and all that, and then we decided to develop that, because all these slum fellows have been thrown over there, and so they needed a proper place to work. So so if we did that, then what they understood was, they understood what TOD meant. They understood what happens to people when they are taken out and thrown somewhere else. They also understood that when you design properly, you can, for the smaller houses, you need more open space, and if you're able to do that, then they're not really tied down to the little holes of places, you see. So I think that was very, very exciting, because we did a housing mix, a mixed land use, where you had the EWS plus you had some higher income group. Now you need the higher income group because they pay the taxes and they can be there, and they can subsidize the the municipal uh, and municipal expenses of the lower people. So of course you don't put the EWS and the HIG together. However, you put it in one part of the building. You have different entrances. They come from one side, you go from the other side. That's fine. And we were able to understand what this inclusive thing was because of their understanding of this business. So there is a ground reality connect. There is no doubt. And whenever we do this, we get some wonderful ideas where you have shared spaces outside your houses and all that. So it does work. It does work very well. Obtaining permission. Obtaining permissions for actual site visits to many places will be difficult, especially, and when we start in August and we start in July, end of July. So we give out the program and we say, okay, now case studies you have to do hospitals, or you have to do offices. And then they come back saying, no, nobody's letting us go because till the 15th, there's high security everywhere. So till the 15th of August, by that time we are supposed to have finished our case studies. So it is a problem. But what we do then is we identify some case studies with people we know, architects we know, and we say, okay, can somebody come there and will you be able to show them around and stuff? Yes. And then do it. Otherwise, then it's online. It has to be. And that is the advantage of having now the computer and internet connectivity. We are never short of places because they're all online.
Right, ma'am. Another question I received from from our institute through my enhance architecture. How to enhance teaching learning process through OBE?
Sorry. How?
How to enhance teaching learning process through OBE?
Oh, but OBE is the best way of teaching learning. You see, because you are giving them a project, then you're telling them to do it themselves, and they will do it in their own time. Of course, they have to keep to the semester. They can't say they're going to do it next semester. They have to come back again next semester, right? But nothing like, and it's called. It's called because it's now a theory. This OBE. However, I think as architects, we've been doing it all the time. We've done it all the time.
Right. Actually, OBE is all about that only.
Yeah.
To enhance
except the problem is that when we are
about that only.
Yeah, the problem is that when we are being inspected for the NAC thing, the questions there are extremely engineering oriented. They don't ask to see how many how innovative we are. They don't ask to see any of the excellent designs that we get through. They just want some engineering kind of question which fit an engineering college. So we generally need to know that proper. We need to do that, get that right.
Right, ma'am. One thing it's a query from my own side, my side. NEP is saying to promote regional languages, and NEP says like we should teach them and give them freedom to talk in regional language. But do you really think is it possible in architectural education? Because language is going to be a big barrier because they have to face the common juries, common presentations, reading material and all.
No, it's not because the best books are in English now.
Yes, the reading material is all available in that only.
And I don't think that's a very good idea because but each college in its own way will be influenced by the local language. For instance, some of my students went to Mumbai to study. Okay, they went to the IIT Mumbai for the industrial design course in Mumbai. So they came back and said, "Ma'am, every crit is in Marathi, and I have to learn Marathi because they talk only in Marathi there. In IIT Mumbai, if they're talking in Marathi, you see, so it happens. We talk in Hindi sometimes all the ones who come from South India here, they learn their Hindi before they go back first. That happens. But to consciously say, okay, maybe you allow it, but you must have a provision for learning English so that they can better themselves later. The third language could be English.
Right. True. At the institute level, we can decide till what extent we can give them freedom. I think because otherwise this is going to be a big issue. They're not able to commit.
Absolutely.
Right.
We have to.
Right.
We have to.
Because even the NEP has some limitations which we cannot fulfill the 100%.
No, let the NEP do what it wants to,
Yes.
because they're going to go to the school. But we will have our own credibility, our own parameters for judging the students and selecting them. So we will not select the ones who don't have.
True. Yes, these were the questions which were there. And is there any question from the panelist side? Yeah. Is there anyone from the panelist side? Okay. I think we don't have any more questions. The presentation was self-explanatory. It was very simply explained. You have simply explained everything. So it was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your presentation and for accepting our invitation and being with us.